So good morning. What I'd like to talk about for the next couple of weeks is Jerusalem, the city of peace, right? Well, of course, in recent times it's been anything but the city of peace. Jerusalem currently is the center of controversy in the Middle East peace process, the two-state solution. The Jews have claimed Jerusalem as its capital, and the Arabs want it as their capital of their new state. And the world has chimed in on this as well. It's not just Israel-Arab conflict. I think just a month or so ago, France said that they were going to reintroduce to the UN General Assembly Resolution number 242, which requires Israel to move back to pre-1967 boundaries, which means they've got to move out of the West Bank and they've got to move out of Jerusalem. And the EU has jumped on this. All these nations are like supporting this. You know, why are they so concerned about Israel and Jerusalem? And they've all chimed in, and the EU says, we've got to put pressure on Israel to get back to the negotiating tables so we can finally have peace. See, they're relating this peace process to peace in the whole world. And they've got a point, as we'll see probably next week. But, and so they've been threatening Israel, because Israel says, we're not going back to the negotiating table. When it all fell apart, remember John Kerry was heading up the charge, and we're going to have peace. We're going to stay here until we have it, and then it all fell apart. And Israel says, we're not going back to the negotiating table. They don't sincerely want peace. Am I moving around too much? So they've threatened, they have economic sanctions that they're going to threaten Israel with if they don't go back to the table to negotiate. There's some nations that have already said, we're going to boycott all Israel products. So this stuff is already happening. Matter of fact, at a recent UN meeting back in July of this year, this was the theme of the meeting. The two-state solution, a key prerequisite for achieving peace and stability in the Middle East. And these were the opening remarks at a UN meeting in Moscow, also in this year, from the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Two-state solution, the only viable way to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Notice, Israeli occupation must end. Failure to do so could further destabilize the situation. So it's on the minds of the nations around the world that there's got to be a solution to this. It's imperative, otherwise it's only going to get worse. But notice how they say Israeli occupation. And part of that is Jerusalem, that they want them to get out of Jerusalem. You're just occupying that territory. So what I hope to discuss, and maybe we can get some answers, is, so Zechariah says here that Jerusalem's going to be a burdensome stone. So why will Jerusalem be a burdensome stone will be one question. Another one it says here, the people will burden themselves with it. Well, why? We'll try to answer that as well. And then it says all people of the earth are going to be gathered against it. And we'll figure out why are they going to be gathered against it. And then we're going to try to answer the question of, well, whose land is it? Is there anything to the Palestinian claim that Jerusalem should be ours? My son Jacob, a few months back, I think I must have been talking at the dinner table with Tammy about it, what I was working on, and he said, oh, I know about that. I know about that whole, what are those people called? They said, the Palestinians. He says, yeah. My teacher told me that the land belongs to the Palestinians. And I said, well, really? And of course, he couldn't go much beyond that. I said, what exactly? Well, I don't know, but he said, that's their land. I said, well, of course, it's not their land. It's God's land. But his promise that not to the Palestinians, but to the seed of Abraham, the spiritual seed of Abraham. So these are going to be some of the questions that we try to accomplish. So let's open up our Bibles to Zechariah chapter 12. Zechariah 12, I need to read it. Nance, you got that? Zechariah 12? Can you read verses 2 to 4 for me, please?
Yes. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege, both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. In that day, saith the Lord, I will smite every horse with astonishment, and his rider with madness. And I will open mine eyes upon the house of Judah, and will smite every horse of the people with blindness.
Great, thank you. So while we see the nations trying to gather to have peace, these certainly aren't words of peace, are they? These are words of war. And whose words are they? Well, they're God's words. Look what he says in verse 2. He says, I will make Jerusalem. That's God. I'm going to make Jerusalem a cup of trembling. Verse 3, I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone. Verse 4, I will smite every horse with terror. The horse is a war machine, right? Back in Zechariah's day. That's what it was used for. So these are words of war. So no matter how mankind tries to solve the Middle East process, it's not going to happen because God doesn't want it to. He's not interested in the temporary peace that might be brought about by mankind. He's looking for the eternal peace. And that's going to come by war. And it's not going to have eternal peace, of course, until the Lord Jesus Christ reigns in Jerusalem. So God, he will frustrate all the efforts of mankind in the peace process. And there's been many of them. Since 1967, there's been many attempts at peace. And we're going to take a look at some of them. And some of them are outstanding. Like, why didn't they take that deal? That was such a great deal. Why couldn't they just do it? And it's because God is sending his angels, frustrate that plan. Because I'm not bringing peace. I'm bringing judgment. And the fact that today we can see the words of Zechariah that Jerusalem will be a burdensome stone, brothers and sisters, tells us that we're that much closer to the return of Christ. It's a sign for us. In 1948, he gave us this great sign. Israel, reborn again, right? We went over some of that in some classes a few months back. What a great sign. He says, you think that's great? Just wait till 1967 when Jerusalem is under complete control by the Jews, which has to be the case for all the end-time prophecies to come about. So the fact that today that they're there and it is a burdensome place tells us that we're very close. And it also, because it wasn't always that case. Jerusalem was not always a burdensome stone. People were not always burdening themselves with Jerusalem. It was ignored, as we'll see, for a long time. So why? Why is it such a burdensome stone? Why are people bothered with it? Well, it's the home of three world religions, right? The Muslim Islamic religion, the pseudo-Christian religion, and Judaism all claim to have a special purpose with Jerusalem. Now this is the old city, or Eastern Jerusalem. And you can see why. This is, it's packed with holy sites. And this perimeter around here, it's only 2.5 miles all around that perimeter in the old city. And packed in there are all these holy sites. And many more. These are just some of the bigger ones. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre for the Christians, Western Wall for the Jews, Dome of the Rock, and the very controversial Temple Mount. And all these are packed in very tight quarters. So you can see, you get three big religions in there with all these holy sites. They're kind of stepping on each other. It's going to be a problem. And that's exactly what it has become. This is just last week. Maybe you heard about it. The Palestinians are in outrage at the Israelites. And here they are hurling these rocks. And look at the size of these rocks. They pelted some guy's car. He went off the road and died with his 2 daughters in the back seat. They're throwing fire bombs. All this because during the Jewish holiday, there were too many Jews in the area coming down and the Palestinians weren't so thrilled, so they were giving them a hard time. So then the Israelis said, well, we're going to send in people, and we're going to keep you out. Anybody under the age of 40, you can't come in here because you're harassing all our visitors who are coming here to worship. And they said, you're going to keep us from the Temple Mount? So the Palestinian leaders said, hey, we're going to call this a day of rage. Just last week, this guy, the Palestinian leader, Mahmoud Abbas, that's what he declared. And so the Palestinians followed suit with all these little riots. Now, this is a meeting that they had when the Pope recognized Palestine as a state immediately. And they came together. And you remember what he called them? Anybody remember what the Pope referred to Mr. Abbas as? Angel of peace. There was a big uproar. Right? You're an angel of peace. This is what the angel of peace had to say just last week. The Al-Aqsa is the mosque in East Jerusalem, is ours. So is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now that's a Christian church. But you see, they're together. They have no right to desecrate them, speaking of the Jews, with their filthy feet. Speaking of the Jews. We won't allow them to do so, and we will do whatever we can to defend Jerusalem. Now keep Abbas, the leader of the Palestinians.
Oh, I thought you said he was the leader of the Jews.
No, I'm sorry, maybe I did. He's the leader of the Palestinian people. Now remember this phrase here, because we're going to get to this phrase here. We'll do whatever it takes to defend Jerusalem. He goes on to say to the Palestinian people, if there's any blood shed during this time, don't worry about it because you're going to go to paradise where you'll be rewarded. These are words of warfare. An Israeli official, ex-official, commenting on this, he said, listen, the people in the know know that Jerusalem is a time bomb. It's going to explode. So just last week we see that there's tremendous tension in Jerusalem. Rome reports, it's a website, May 2015. This is what the Pope said to the Palestinian people. We will always be together because our mission is the same. Anyone know what the mission of the Palestinian people is?
Eradicate Israel.
Yeah. Get them out of there. Get rid of the Jews. Our mission is the same. And the Pope would like that as well because I think we discussed it before, but it goes along with their theology. They can't have Jews in Jerusalem. According to their theology, Jews have to be scattered because they're constantly being punished by God. So the fact that they're back in their homeland and have control of Jerusalem doesn't sit well with them. They need them out of the way. So they both have the same mission, and they know it. Just remember this as we're going to look at some other things. He joins themselves, the Muslim mosque and the pseudo-Christian church joined together. Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah says, for it is the day of the Lord's vengeance. These are prophetic words of Armageddon, Judgment Day, the day of the Lord's vengeance, the year of recompenses, payback for all that you've done to my people. You're going to get paid back. You're going to be judged for it. For what? For the controversy of Zion. Now, Zion in Scripture usually means Jerusalem. And that word controversy means contest. The contest for Zion, for Jerusalem. That's what we see in the world today. There's a contest for it. Who does it belong to? Does it go to the Jews? Does it go to the Arabs? Does it go to nobody? Is it the international community? That's what the papacy wants it to be. Just the international. No, it doesn't belong to anybody. Who controls it? Well, while all of these religions put their claim in for Jerusalem, God's already got a plan. Jerusalem, the city which I've chosen to put my name there. The Lord said, in Jerusalem will I put my name. In Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. See, God associates his name with Jerusalem. They tried to put their claims in on Jerusalem. God's already done it. For the Lord has chosen Zion. He hath desired it for his habitation. This is my rest forever. There will I dwell, for I have desired it. So they all desire it, but God's already desired it. It's his. Now this is after he's given them, the Israelites, rest in the land. He tells them, then there shall be a place, Jerusalem, which the Lord your God shall choose to cause his name to dwell there. There shall he bring all that I command you. Jerusalem is going to be a place of worship. If we're still in Zechariah, let's just flip back to Zechariah chapter 8. God has a plan for Jerusalem. Anybody got Zechariah 8? Linda, please. Could you read verse 20 to 22, Zechariah 8, please?
Thus saith the Lord of hosts, it shall yet come to pass, that there shall come people and the inhabitants of many cities, and the inhabitants of one city shall go to another, saying, let us go speedily to pray before the Lord, and to seek the Lord of hosts. I will go also. Yea, many people and strong nations shall come to seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem, and to pray before the Lord.
So Jerusalem is going to be a place of worship for the entire world. Let's go over to Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, chapter 62. This is what he says. Prophet Isaiah, chapter 62. I'm going to read verse 6 and 7. I have set watchmen upon thy walls, O Jerusalem, who shall never hold their peace day or night. Ye that make mention of the Lord, keep not silence, and give him no rest till he establish, until he make Jerusalem a praise in the earth. So for a long time, Israel was neglected. Jerusalem was neglected. Today, it's a center of controversy, but one day, it's going to be a city of praise in the earth. And why? If we go down to verse 10, go through the gates, prepare ye the way of the people. Cast up the highway, gather out the stones, lift up a standard for the people. That's what they used to do when a king was coming into town. They would go clear the road, smooth it out, get rid of the stones. That's what he's suggesting here. Behold, the Lord hath proclaimed unto the end of the earth, say to the daughters of Zion, behold, thy salvation cometh. Behold, and his reward is with him, and his work before him. And they shall call him the holy people, the redeemed of the Lord. And thou shalt be called, talking about Jerusalem, sought out, a city not forsaken. And again, it was a city forsaken, but it's not going to be, because Christ is going to be ruling in Jerusalem. So God has a wonderful plan for Jerusalem. So what about the Palestinian, Arab, Muslim claim that Jerusalem, they've got to have it. It's very precious to us. We need it as our capital. Talked about, you're going to be a city of praise. You're not going to be ignored anymore. So is Jerusalem really holy to the Muslims? So this is under Muslim rule during the Ottoman Empire. This guy is some sort of famous French writer. I never read anything he wrote. But he took a trip there, and this is what he wrote about his trip to Jerusalem. Ruins everywhere, everywhere the odors of graves, the holy city of three religions is rotting away from boredom, desertion, and neglect. Under Muslim rule, this is Jerusalem, just rotting away, it's neglected. Now, after World War I, the Brits were negotiating with the Arabs. Some of the Arab people didn't like the Ottoman Empire, right? So that reminds us of so the Arabs not getting along, right? What did they say about Ishmael? Wild man, right? Hand at his brother's throat. They can't get along, right? So there's a Arab, the Ottoman Empire is ruling the air, but the other Arabs go, no, we don't like them. So the Brits say, hey, what if you guys help us get rid of them? And what we'll do is we'll give you some land. And they say, good deal, we'll do it. Now, during the negotiations, the British negotiators never brought up Jerusalem as part of the lands that they were going to give to the Arabs because it wasn't important to them. This is what the chief negotiator from the Brits said. He said, there was no place south of Damascus, right? So Syria is up here, city of Damascus, down here is Israel and Jerusalem, to which the Arabs placed vital importance. They didn't care about it. Why didn't they want to claim it? If Jerusalem's so important to the Muslims, why didn't they ask for it in these negotiations? They didn't care. And you remember when the British forces in 1917 walked into Jerusalem with Allenby? How many shots did he fire to subdue them? None. Not a single shot was fired. It wasn't worth fighting for to the Muslims. But you remember what Abbas said? We'll do anything to defend Jerusalem. Well, that's not always been the line. What's going on here? Yeah, so this, let me see here. So, 1947, the international community says, okay, we're going to divide up this area. We're going to have an Arab area, and we're going to have a Jewish area, and Jerusalem is going to be an international city. It belongs to nobody. This is what we're going to do. 1948, Israel declares themselves a nation. The Arab nations immediately attack them. During this attack, also in 1947, they said, okay, international city, Jerusalem, no one owns it, but everybody can have access to it. The Jews have access to their holy sites, the Muslims to their holy sites, the Christians, and so forth. Everybody can go. So in the Battle of Independence in 1948, Jordan annexed the West Bank in East Jerusalem, where all those holy sites were. They just took them over without much say from the UN. They didn't complain much. They just kind of let that go. And this was the access that they allowed the Jews to go to their holy sites with. Barbed wire roads, fences. So that was pretty welcoming, right? They could get that access. Again, not much was heard of from the UN that said you have to leave this open to them. So the Jews weren't allowed to go into their holy sites. And on occasion, up on these buildings over here, they would have snipers to shoot across if they saw any Jews on the other side. But you know what? They had Jerusalem. It's what the Muslims wanted. But they didn't make it their capital. Actually, they diminished the importance of Jerusalem. They chose this place, Amman, a little more inland in Jordan, to be the capital. And they moved some Arab institutions that were in Jerusalem, and they moved them out of there. And Arab Jerusalem became quite an isolated town, stagnant economy. There were most people left because they just couldn't make a living. And, it was so important, Jerusalem was so important to the Muslims that no Arab leader ever visited Jerusalem during the 19 years that Jordan ruled over Jerusalem. It wasn't until after the Six-Day War that the Arabs again made Jerusalem the centerpiece of their political agenda. See, what they would do, the Crusades took over Jerusalem. It was a wasteland. The Crusades came in, led by the Pope, and they said, we're going to take back Jerusalem. That's kind of a pretty important place. Let's go in there. So when they killed the Jews and they killed the Muslims, and the Pope said, I'm the king of Jerusalem. And then the Muslims said, well, wait a second. We should have that. They took it from us. And they said, and then a few years later, they took it back. And then it just fell apart. They just ignored it. It became dilapidated. Once had a population of 9,000 people. That's it. Right? Buildings all falling apart. And then World War I came. Britain said, we should come up with maybe we'll put some Jews there. We'll give that land. Whoa! Don't put Jews there. And they were upset. 1967, the Jews take all of Jerusalem. Oh, how could they take Jerusalem? We love Jerusalem. Well, anytime you had it, you just ignored it. I think of a child, right, who's in the corner playing with all the toys, ignoring those toys until a little kid comes and picks up one of those toys and says, and then all of a sudden, I want that toy. No, honey, you got all these other toys. No, but that's the one I want. And as soon as that kid leaves and puts down that toy, the kid forgets it. Right? Goes back to all the other toys. That's what they do. That's their pattern. They only want Jerusalem when someone else wants it. When they have it, they just ignore it. So, so the Muslim leaders began calling for devotion to Jerusalem. This is Arafat, Yasser Arafat. I think we're all pretty familiar with this guy, leader of the PLO, Palestinian Liberation, right? They want to liberate Palestine, get rid of the Jews is what they want to do. That's actually in their statement of faith, right? It's like the number one thing, get rid of the Jews. And he said, oh, Jerusalem is in the innermost of our feelings, the feeling of our people, the feeling of the Arabs, Muslims, and Christians in the world. Of course, no mention of the Jews, but again, we have that Christian-Muslim alliance. Now, the Arab nations that once ignored the religious sites of Jerusalem, the Muslim sites just fell apart. The Dome of the Rock, they used to scrape the gold off of it, and the place was just dilapidated. But now, when the cry comes for Jerusalem, all of a sudden, they were very happy to pour money into these religious sites. It became a rallying cry to unite the Arabs. Saudi Prince Abdullah, Jerusalem is just like the holy city of Mecca. They never would have said that. Mecca is the place. And again, they've always ignored it, but all of a sudden it's on equal, it's just like Mecca. Isn't Mecca like your number one holy site? Yeah, Jerusalem's just like it. We've got to keep it. Rallying the people. But that wasn't always the case. This guy is some sort of famous geographer, I guess, did a lot of the maps and stuff. And he said, Mecca is holy to the Muslims, Jerusalem to the Jews. So this wasn't always the Muslim case. Jerusalem wasn't important to them. This is a quote from this guy, Zohair Moshin, head of the PLO, military ops, member of the PLO Executive Council, in an interview in 1977. This is pretty telling, I think. It is only for tactical reasons that we carefully stress our Palestinian identity. For it is in the national interest of Arabs to encourage a separate Palestinian identity to counter Zionism. What he's saying is, we've got to create a new people called Palestinians. That's what we've got to do. The founding of a Palestinian state is a new tool in our ongoing battle against Israel. That's their new weapon. They can't beat them in a conventional warfare, as we'll look at when we look at the 67 war. And this is 10 years later. So they've got to come up with a new strategy. And so we're going to create a Palestinian people and a Palestinian land, and they don't exist. An Arab history professor wrote 30 years ago, he was describing a trait of the Arab people, okay, a particular trait that the Arabs have. And he said it was called the mythopic faculty, which is the ability to create myths, to believe in them, and to make others believe it as well. And that's what they've done with the Palestinian people in the land of Palestine. There is no historical land of Palestine. It was Canaan, and then it was Israel. They have no artifacts. They have no culture. There's no Palestinian language. There's no ancestry. They've created a myth, and the people have bought it. It's propaganda. And you need, remember he said, in our battle, it's going to war against Jerusalem, against the Jews. It's a battle, it's a war. And in war, you got to have propaganda. It's very important, right? Who was the guy for Hitler? Goebbels, right? He said the propaganda machine. He was able to convince people it was okay to kill other people because they really weren't people. And they went, yeah, that makes sense. They killed Christ. This subhuman. His propaganda was so good that they believed that they weren't even, the people they were killing weren't even really people. They were subhuman. That's good propaganda. You need it for war. Happens all the time. If you don't have good propaganda, because you got to convince people it's okay. You know, America did the same thing with the Japs. Oh, they're evil. Evil people. And they make up all these stories of what they do. And this is what they're going to do to your families if we don't win this war. And of course, it's on young minds, right? Oh, okay. Yeah, we do. We got to get rid of them. So you need propaganda for warfare. And they've been doing a heck of a job on it. It works out very well. This is from, I think it was called the New American Dictionary. And this is how it describes Bethlehem. The city of Bethlehem, a town in Israeli-occupied Jordan. Israeli-occupied Jordan. The Palestinian village of biblical times where David lived and Jesus was born. Bethlehem. Jesus is a Palestinian. Can you believe that? This is the propaganda. This is how powerful it's become. Does anybody have a New King James Version Bible? Do you? Can you look up for me Song of Solomon? Song of Solomon, chapter 6.
Got it.
Verse 13.
Return, return, O Shulamite. Return, return, that we may look upon you. What would you see in the Shulamite? As it were, the dance of the two camps.
Yeah. Do you have a footnote on the Shulamite?
No.
No footnote?
Well,
Okay.
no.
It might not have been all the versions, but in some of the versions there's a footnote for the Shulamite, and it says in the footnote, young Palestinian woman. Again, there is no such thing as a Palestinian. They're Arabs. But this propaganda, this believing of a myth has turned out, and it's showing up in the dictionaries, it's showing up in Bibles. So they're very good at this propaganda of making people believe a myth. Now again, how important is Jerusalem to the Muslim? Jerusalem, Zion, again, same thing. Mentioned 963 times in the Bible. That's the Hebrew Bible. They have a few more books than our Old Testament. 0 times is it mentioned in the Quran. Now, after 1967, when they wanted to, again, the Muslim leaders wanted to make Jerusalem, we got to have, so they took one verse in the Quran and they said, see, that means Jerusalem. And it's so off base. It's like, really? It's not even mentioned in the Quran. The Jews pray facing Jerusalem. The Muslims pray with their backs to it. How important is Jerusalem to the Muslims? Israel was a nation with Jerusalem as its capital for 2,000 years before there even was a religion as Islam. King David made Jerusalem the capital of Israel. The Prophet Muhammad never even went there. Does anybody have any comments, questions? Yes. Yes.
Because my son is Islam,
Yeah.
and he's Muslim. He's not the radical, but
Yeah.
he says they believe in just the first five books of Moses.
Mhm.
And briefly, to give you a rough idea of we had a discussion on was how is the sins forgiven? And he says they go right straight to God. And I said, not according to the first five books of Moses. You have to have a high priest, and I told him about the sacrifice and so forth. And it has to be a place where God designated where the sacrifice was to be given, and what the priest was supposed to do, what the people were supposed to do with the animal by putting their hands on his head, and so forth and so forth. And he was surprised at that.
Yeah.
That and that's out of. And the other thing that I got into thinking about was, if he thinks that the Quran is inspired by God, I said, okay, let's say that's true. And I believe that the Bible is inspired by God, and I know that's true. Well, then we should have the same information then, because God is not a mouth of confusion.
That's right.
And so, and he's never yet brought the Quran to my house.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So because it's top of the head.
Yeah.
But I had my book open up.
Yeah. But that's interesting, because they believe in the same, in the first five books, right? And we're told that what is it? The Assyrian will say to the Egyptian, "Let's go up to the house of the Lord." They're going to be converted, and they can do that in the first five books of the Bible, right? It's going to be the Christians that fight against Christ, because they have no idea what's going on. So I guess we got a few more minutes. I wasn't going to start this, but maybe we'll just start the 6-Day War, the battle for Jerusalem. So prior to this 6-Day War, after 48, in the time between lots of threats, lots of little attacks back and forth. At this point, NASA's making all these threats. He's the president of Egypt, that he's going to wipe out the Jews and take over this territory. And then he gets some information, false information from Russia, saying that, the Jews are planning an attack. They've mounted some forces up by Syria, and they're going to come down Sinai Peninsula as well. So he says, well, let me rally the troops. And he goes into the Sinai with his massive troops. Of course, but there were UN peacekeeping troops there that are supposed to keep the peace. And he says, you guys get out of here. And they do. Just, okay.
Who's he?
Nasser, Egyptian president, sorry. He says, you guys get out of the way. And they just leave. And then he shuts down the shipping to any Israeli ships coming in and out. So Israel has already thought that is a declaration of war. We've already made that known to everybody. You shut down the shipping to us, that's a declaration of war. So they know war's coming. But they make a preemptive strike, and they just annihilate the Egyptian Air Force, wipe it out in day one. But it was funny because they had warned Jordan, the king of Jordan. They called him, they said, listen, do not get involved in this war. We're begging you, don't get involved in it. First of all, they didn't want to have all these fronts that they had to be fighting on. They're a pretty small army. They said, just don't get involved. And then Nasser, the president of Egypt, puts out a report to the world. We're winning the war. Now, they just got their Air Force wiped out, but he's trying to gain support from Jordan, right? He wants them to join the war, and it worked. Jordan said, oh, wow, it looks like we've almost got victory. Let's jump in late, and we'll be able to get something out of it. So they jump in. What they don't realize is the whole Egyptian Air Force has been wiped out. Word's coming back to America. Israel's in trouble. Egypt's winning the war. That's what the whole world thinks. But it was just the opposite. And so they wipe out the Air Force, and they're about to. They hear peace deals coming. Egypt is already, because they're just decimated, they're already willing to sign a peace deal. And they say, let's take Jerusalem while we can. And one guy says, Yoshi, something or other, one of the famous generals says, no, they're going to fight for Jerusalem, let's not do it. Then he hears that the rest of the nations are starting to sign this peace deal. He says, all right, now could be the time, we're going to take it quickly. So he goes in, and they don't put up a fight. Couple of shots fired, that's it. They quickly take Jerusalem, and they're quite excited. So here are some of the numbers, right? They're pretty heavily outnumbered. Of course, the Arabs even have more in reserve, just millions and millions of people, right? The tanks, the equipment, but the Israelis just wipe out all of the aircraft, just destroy them. And in 6 days, what did they do on the 7th day? Probably a coincidence, right? But you see, Israel, they took credit for the victory. They said, hey, our Air Force, what generals we have. But it was God. Like birds hovering overhead, the Lord Almighty will shield Jerusalem. He will shield it and deliver it. He will pass over it and will rescue it. I will defend this city and save it for my sake and for the sake of David, my servant. Richie?
That's really something where it says, and he will pass over it. Think of Israel coming out of Egypt.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Passover.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so Israel took credit for this war. Like, hey, we're pretty good, right? They didn't really give any credit to God.
Can I just say one other thing?
Yeah.
There's a brother, when I was at Westerly, came home from work one night late, and he had a brand new baby, and he had the baby bottles in a purifying them, I guess, they were plastic and so forth, and he took a shower, and his wife was asleep, and she smelled something, and it had boiled over, and the plastic had burned and everything and whatnot. And so they called the fire department, and the fire department told them to get out because it was toxic. And the baby was in, I think it started from the kitchen, and then went over the ceiling one night. And the fireman said, and this brought tears to my eyes, and the brother, he said, the fireman said, it seems to have passed over here in your son's room, the baby's room, and went down the hall. And he told me the story.
Yeah.
And both of us had tears in the eyes.
Yeah. You think there was an angel there?
And yes, indeed.
There were angels here, right? We see it. We see the work of the angels. So this is I think we'll stop after this one here. So this is the 6-Day War. These are the Jews at the Western Wall for the first time. Remember, the Jordanians kept them out, right? So the first time they're there, super holy site, 1948, and now they're there. You know, there's videos of them crying and all this stuff. And this is the land grab. It was quite a land grab. So you see here, this was Israel before and then afterwards. So they get all of Jerusalem, they get the West Bank, and they get the Sinai Peninsula. They just crushed them. And they took all this land. Now they eventually gave back the Sinai. Egypt finally realized we're never going to beat these guys. Let's just sign a peace deal with them. And Anwar Sadat signed that peace deal with them, and they said, all right, take back the Sinai. And that peace deal's worked out. Didn't work out for Anwar Sadat. He was assassinated for doing it, but that peace deal was kind of worked out, so they gave back that land. So next week, we'll look at the effects of this 6-Day War, because 1967, this war has left quite an impact that is still being felt today, and that the world traced back to this day when they took Jerusalem.